从经典力学到相对论，从原子到夸克，他们一步步为人类的知识和视野开疆扩界。
Surely it is an obligation for us to do as best we can, to understand as much as we can about this place in which we were born.
好奇、想象、勇气、执着，什么铸就了诺奖级的科学发现？
科学的进展是多数服从少数，不是少数服从多数。你不能投票来解决物理问题。
面对越来越微观的尺度，越来越难以验证的理论，基础物理如何驱散头顶的乌云
？Time scales of experiments are now decades, not years. The energies involved are very large.
I don't think that physics is finished.
基础物理又将带领人类走向何方？对话正在播出，敬请关注。
在科学发展史上，能被称为革命的新发现屈指可数，而粲夸克的发现正是其中之一。1974年11月12日，《物理评论快报》杂志收到了丁肇中团队关于发现 J 粒子的文章投稿。后来，科学家们确信，这篇文章中描述的 J 粒子是由一对从未被观测到的新夸克组成。这个新夸克就是粲夸克。这一发现很快与其他实验的结果得到了互相验证。丁肇中和伯顿·里克特凭借这一发现获得了1976年的诺贝尔物理学奖。粲夸克的发现不但验证了由格拉肖、伊利奥普洛斯和迈亚尼提出的 GAM 机制，更推动了粒子物理标准模型的发展。这一在11月发生的新科学进展，后来被粒子物理学界称为11月革命。今年是11月革命的50周年。50年来，对粲夸克的研究为粒子物理学带来了无数的惊喜。在发现粲夸克10年后，中国的土地上，一项与粲夸克研究密切相关的大科学装置破土动工。这不仅是中国的第一个大科学装置，也是中国高能物理实验研究的正式起步。
50年后的今天，这几位物理学家来到了我现在所在的中国科学院高能物理研究所。一会儿我们就要去见见他们，来看一看这些只能在教科书上看到的名字究竟长什么样子，和他们来一场真实的对话。各位好，欢迎收看对话。据制药和摘要，对话由赤水河上游高端酱酒摘要酒独家冠名播出，由做一条好轮胎的赛伦集团特别支持，由豪华旗舰 MPV 全新极氪009特别呈现。格拉肖先生和迈亚尼先生曾经做过一个预言，是粲夸克的存在。丁肇中先生呢，发现了这粒子，直接证实了粲夸克的存在。我想问一下二位，你们知道这粒子被发现的那一刻，你们在做什么
Was I shocked? I was awakened out of a deep sleep when Dr. Ting phoned me and said I should come to his office. He did not explain why. So I got dressed and I got into my car and I drove to MIT and found his office. He explained to me what he had done and showed me a picture of his experimental results, and I was absolutely flabbergasted. It was something extraordinary, very difficult to understand, and I think I said to him, please give me a moment to think about this, and I rushed out.
I was in Italy at the time, so the thing was not so instantaneous as Shelley. But I must say that the particle came out with some surprising qualities.
发现了这粒子之后， 您打的第一个电话是打给格拉肖先生的吗？
我想，不是第一个就是第二个，因为我跟这两位格拉肖和迈阿密非常熟，这两位到我办公室来过，说你在做什么？我说我在做什么实验？他就跟我说，他们有个理论，表示在正负电子对里面可能有个新的物质存在。这两位是应该算是最先知道的。
It was a spectacular discovery. It was the discovery of the first particle ever known that contained the fourth type of quark. When quarks were invented by Murray Gell-Mann in 1964, he had 3 flavors of quarks, and they could explain all of the nuclear particles that then existed. But I suspected that there had to be a fourth quark for reasons of beauty and elegance. So I proposed a fourth quark, and Sam found it. Share the Nobel Prize for this discovery.
我唯一的感觉就是50年好快，就像昨天一样。开始做实验的时候，并不是因为找新的扩克。我开始的时候是测量电子的半径，找不到电子的半径，可是发现光在很短的时间里面可以有质量。这有3个粒子，光变成这3个粒子以后，还会再会变成光。我就觉得，为什么光只会变成这3个粒子？质量都是差不多的，有没有更重的质量的新的粒子？我开始做实验就是要找有没有第4个粒子，是非常非常困难，因为我那个实验的仪器的精密度就是说10亿分之一，什么意思呢？就是等于北京下雨的时候，每秒钟有10亿分一个雨点，中间有一个是红的，要把它找出来。所以大家都认为这是不可能的，所以这个实验被欧洲的加速器、美国的大加速器都拒绝了。后来，在美国的长岛的 Brookhaven 国家实验室，终于通过了这个实验。
是受到了一定程度的质疑的。您为什么在这个方向上还要坚持做下去研究？
科学的进展是多数服从少数，不是少数服从多数。你不能投票来解决物理的问题。我做过很多的实验，回过来想绝大多数的结果，虽然当时看着很重要，现在看来都很普通的事情。只有5、6个实验，我觉得比较重要。这5、6个实验，每一个实验都受到绝大多数人的反对。有的人认为物理上没有意义，有的人说这太困难了，做不出来。
We realized that Sam had demonstrated the 2 essential ingredients for a successful scientist. And one is imagination. He convinced himself that he would look for another heavy photon. That's imagination. But then when he proposed to do this, people laughed at him. They said, this is silly. We will not support this experiment. We will not do this experiment. He asked laboratory after laboratory. He had perseverance, the second great requirement, imagination and persistence.
No, I agree perfectly with what Shelley has said. Research is a combination of imagination, of course, rigorous thinking. Sometimes you happen to open the right door, as we did and as he did.
我们知道50年前这粒子不是在北京被发现的，但是为什么发现50周年的纪念活动要在北京举办呢
？50周年的活动在北京，最主要的是，这粒子的加速，这些 总共现在找到30个新的粒子，都是在中国科学院高能物理所发现的，所以他们对了解这个贡献是非常非常大的。
Beijing Electron-Positron Collider has been now working for over 40 years, as Sam just said, is making extraordinary discoveries of these heavy photon. Fantastic laboratory for studying the dynamics, which is very complicated and rich, and of the interactions, the forces between the quarks, which allows us to essentially understand nuclear matter. So that is a very important contribution. Achievements of the Chinese effort are truly remarkable.
马亚尼教授，您对中国的高能物理的发展也非常的了解，还有哪些进步和发展的空间呢？
Yes, in fact, I was recalling that the first time I visited this laboratory was in 1993. At that time, this laboratory was a medium-sized laboratory, not very conspicuous. The progress that has been made since 1993 is astonishing, in particular the issue of neutrino oscillations. And it is characterized by a certain number of parameters. The last parameter that had not been measured in all other laboratories because the experiment was very difficult was determined by this group here. At Daya Bay, they made a very clever experiment in southern China, neutrinos starting from a nuclear reactor and measuring the probability that becomes another neutrino. And this is a very important experiment. There will be another one called JADE in preparation. So in neutrino physics and in accelerator physics, China has made an enormous progress in the last 25 years. And therefore, it's perfectly reasonable that this laboratory and Chinese particle physicists may aim at a more ambitious objective, like making the large super collider, which is now under study.
最近一段时间呢，埃隆·马斯克成功回收了火箭，各大媒体都非常的关注。马斯克经常说一句话，说物理学没有说不，他笃信基础物理的相关定律。马斯克曾经去过您的办公室，您给他讲什么了？
这位呢来了以后呢，问了几个问题。第一个问题，能不能用原子核能到火星上去？我跟他解释，我现在的实验，我现在这个实验呢，在太空，就是找宇宙的起源。我们这个仪器在太空这个仪器有650个微处理机，是一个很大的仪器。他就问这些微处理机怎么保险法？在太空因为辐射，我就跟他说，在我们怎么样在地面测量，非常非常细心。我记得我送他离开我办公室的时候，我说你问了我一下午，我只有一个小问题。来问你，完全属于好奇。他说你问，我说你是什么时候开始赚钱的？他说他11岁的时候，所以这个人确实和人不一样的，可是看不出来他是这么能干的。
所以中国有句话叫“人不可貌相”。
对。
就跟基础物理研究一样，不能看着不行就一定不行，也未必。
人都是好奇的，人是原动力向前走。今天做不出来的事情，不代表明天做不出来。
可能我们很多不了解基础物理、不了解物理学的人很难想象，对于基础粒子的研究到底能给我们的世界带来什么？
基础粒子研究在100年以前发现电子，发现 X 光，当时问这有什么用处？现在电子和 X 光用在医学上是不可少的东西。30年代的时候，研究基本粒子就是研究原子物理，原子物理现在用在激光、 导航这些都在上面。50年代的时候，研究基础物理是原子核物理，原子核物理现在用在能源上。大家要了解的是，从发现一个现象到能应用的时候，可能有30年、40年时间。等能应用的时候，你改变整个人的生活。
俄罗斯教授觉得，基础物理的研究能给我们的普通大众带来什么样的价值
I think the main thing is understanding of the natural world. We're all born curious. I mean, our species has been successful because of our curiosity. Unfortunately, many curious children go to school and their teachers tell them, don't ask these silly questions, and their curiosity is turned off. But some of us continue to be curious, and as Sam said, the most rewarding part of a life of a scientist is the ability to spend one's life in the pursuit of answers to these why questions and how questions. And it's extraordinarily exciting and often very frustrating. But when you understand something, either because you came up with a new idea or did a new experiment or one of your friends did, it's the greatest feeling in the world. It, of course, has enormous practical benefits, which is what governments or companies, corporations care about. But the real reward is truly just understanding how the universe is made, what it is made of, how does it work, how did it begin. These are wonderful questions and wonderful answers we have partially. I think that's much more important in the long run than the obvious material benefits of technology that ultimately flow from all of our discoveries.
It's a faith, really. And I like to think of how things were 100 years ago when quantum mechanics was born. There were a bunch of kids, one of them a little older than the rest, that was Niels Bohr. But then there were people like Heisenberg and Pauli and et cetera, very young guys, people mostly in their 20s, very international. There was a Dane, there was an Austrian, there was a couple Germans, there a Frenchman, there was a Polish-French lady, a whole bunch of young people running around in different cities, mostly Copenhagen, and fooling around and working out the theory of the atom, how it was made, how it was put together, what the rules were. And that was the birth of quantum mechanics. Now, these people, these youngsters, were not out to make a buck. They didn't form a company. They didn't try to patent quantum mechanics. There might be a job to be got, like to become a professor, and most of them did. But it was the joy of learning, of knowing, of teaching, of understanding the universe. Surely it is an obligation for us to do as best we can, to understand as much as we can about this place in which we were born.
有很多学基础科学的人，因为种种原因，没有坚持自己的梦想。比如说，几位有没有学生本来是跟你们学物理的，后来去搞金融了，有吗？
Yes. No, not a lot, a few. Sometimes I'm sorry because they're often brilliant students who go off to finance. But, you know, physicists forever have been moving out of what we call traditional physics into other fields.
There was a statistic at CERN that says that the people that make doctoral theses at CERN, of all of them, only 40% stay in physics. What do they add and do? Well, they go to the banks, they work in industry, but they bring the formation that they acquired in computing, in electronics, in simply having the logic of thinking to the things, that is very valuable.
Physics education is the best possible education because we teach our students how to essentially think, how to approach a problem posed by nature, construct models, invent new ways of observing, quantifying the data, and so on. We teach our students how to think, and that can be directly then used to understand questions in the so-called physical world, but also outside the physical world. Sometimes I feel if one of my students ends up in one of these other areas, I feel sad because he won't have the enjoyment of doing physics. I do try to tell my students that making money is not as important as enjoying what you're doing in life. But no, I think it's good. I really think we should probably produce twice as many physicists and lose twice as many to other areas. It would be good for the world.
今年诺贝尔的奖物理学奖被一个研究计算机的科学家获得了，会不会对未来我们物理学的研究方向产生一些影响
In my opinion, it's a great example of a invention, actually, using ideas that came from physics, which has had an enormous impact on all of the other sciences, neuroscience, biology, as well as computer science. It was given to John Hopfield, who was a colleague of mine at Princeton when I was in Princeton, first-rate condensed matter theorist, who got interested in how the brain works. And using ideas that came from condensed matter physics, spin glasses, he came up with a very brilliant idea how you would construct out of these spins, or analogs of spins, an associative memory. And the other half of the Nobel Prize was shared by someone who came from computer science, who perfected parts of those applications, and now dominates one of the foundational aspects that led to machine learning, large language models, AI, this came from physics. So this is very common in physics. I once had to define physics in a broad sense. What is physics? Because nature has no such divisions between physics, chemistry. Nature is nature.
All one need do to understand this Nobel Prize is to read Nobel's will, because the prize is to be given by the idea or the development that contributes most to human welfare. However much I support the Nobel Prize that was given for the discovery of gravitational waves, the discovery and development of artificial intelligence will have a much greater effect on human welfare than gravitational waves. So I think this was an excellent Nobel Prize.
For the present Nobel Prize, I share what David has said. I imagine to give to artificial intelligence the question before some experiment, does charm exist? I got something like that because when we were proposing LHC to find the Higgs boson, I received from some American, well, but by now our computer programs know how to do things. Why do you have to make an experiment to know that? But that's ridiculous. We'll never be able to tell a priori if the result will be yes or no. Does charm exist? Well, it's a matter of nature. It's not a matter of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence can only collect what we know at present. But there is an unknown part of the story, and that is nature. And if you don't have an experiment, you will never know.
丁教授，您觉得 AI 最近如火如荼的发展？您觉得 AI 的出现会对基础物理的研究的范式会产生哪些影响？
我猜想 ，AI 当然非常重要，它不会想出四度空间，不会想出量子力学。不会想出相对论，就是创造性的东西，我认为 AI 不会想出来。
从经典力学到相对论，从原子到夸克，他们一步步为人类的知识和视野开疆扩界。
Surely it is an obligation for us to do as best we can, to understand as much as we can about this place in which we were born.
好奇、想象、勇气、执着，什么铸就了诺奖级的科学发现？
科学的进展是多数服从少数，不是少数服从多数。你不能投票来解决物理的问题。
面对越来越微观的尺度，越来越难以验证的理论，基础物理如何驱散头顶的乌云？
Time scales of experiments are now decades, not years. The energies involved are very large.
I don't think that physics is finished.
基础物理又将带领人类走向何方？对话正在播出，敬请关注。
欢迎继续收看对话。据制药喝摘要，对话由赤水河上游高端酱酒摘要酒独家冠名播出。在座的同学，你们有没有人看过《生活大爆炸》这个美剧？从你们的表情当中，我们就读出了一些什么。坦率的讲，我获得这些基础的物理学知识，就是从这部美剧当中获得的。然后我们听说，美剧当中的物理学家 Shelton 就是您本人，是吗？
Yes, the character in The Big Bang, the lead character in the story, is Sheldon Cooper, and Sheldon is allegedly connected with me, and Cooper is connected with Leon Cooper, who is a Nobel Prize-winning physicist at Brown University in America. And the program is extremely popular in China. I know that because I've been to 10 different cities in China, to at least 10 different universities giving talks, and always even gone to some high schools. Inevitably, the kids would ask something about the Big Bang Theory.
您觉得这个《生活大爆炸》当中 Shelton 这个角色跟您本人像吗？
No.
完全不像。
I don't watch silly programs on television. I do physics. I know how popular it is. It's a program that gets kids interested in science. I got interested in science from reading science fiction. I was 12 years old when the atomic bomb was dropped on Japan. I didn't understand quantum mechanics, that's for sure, but I knew that the bomb had to do with uranium and with the fact that one isotope of uranium was fissionable and another isotope was not fissionable. And I would explain this to my teacher in junior high school at the age of 12. And that's the advantage of reading science fiction. It's not that I was that smart, it's that I was reading science fiction. So you never know what creates scientists.
你们几位科学家是怎么爱上物理的？
No, frankly speaking, I did study physics because I was interested in astronomy. I read a book on the way the sun works, written by an Italian astronomer. It was so fascinating that I wanted to get more. Becoming a scientist means really what has been cleared in this discussion, something that will absorb your life. And I remember when my kids saw me a little bit absent, they said, hey, he's gone in physics.
你们眼中的物理之美是什么样的？
对我个人来说，好奇，想了解自然现象，做别人做不到的。
What is the beauty of physics? Beauty is really hard to define. You know it when you see it. But it's like many beautiful things, it's an acquired taste. So it's hard to explain what is beautiful. An equation can be beautiful. Many of our explanations of nature turn out to be extremely beautiful and often in a mathematical sense. We're somewhat surprised by how beautiful our explanations are or what that even means. But I think we are, as a species, as I said a while ago, have evolved to try to understand the physical world. We've been very successful. And our brain rewards us when we understand something, gives us a jolt of pleasure. And we regard that's what we call often beautiful.
今天录制节目之前呢，我们也搜集了一些年轻科学家想向各位提出的问题。他们有人说，粒子物理的未来方向在哪儿
I mean, I don't think that physics is finished. There are still many questions that we don't know the answer. But there is a limit to what we can say now because this limit is given by the energy where we can push our machines. So, for instance, we know that in the universe, there is a lot of matter which has gravitational power and not made of protons and neutrons. That's called the dark matter. What will dark matter be made for? Will be particles which are heavier than the Higgs boson and that we have not yet been able to produce. There are theories like that. There are theories of other kind. And until we don't do the experiments, we will not know what is the answer. And so one of the reasons why we think we have to push for a higher energy machine is precisely that.
All of science, in the end, is based on experiment. We make predictions based on our understanding, and then we ask nature, are these predictions correct or not? Nature never says you're right. It only says you're wrong. Most often it says you're wrong. Sometimes it says, okay, this prediction is correct. Come back and try again, and we try again and again. And after a while, if enough of our predictions are not wrong, we begin to have faith. Experiment has become a little more difficult. The time scales of experiments are now decades, not years. The energies involved are very large, the distances very small. So at the current time, CEPC is in its late stages of development, ready to go, and to become the leading instrument for exploring the microscopic nature of matter in the world. This is an enormous opportunity for China.
For many years, the elementary particle physics experimentally was dominated by the Americans. The Americans built the first cyclotron, the first great accelerators, made the important discoveries that led to where we are now. But around the mid-70s, Europe started to play a major role. And for the last 50 years or so, Europe was the center of the high-energy physics. Now, in another 25 years or so, China may have the next large accelerator. If I had to bet, I would think that the Europeans will not do things that quickly. However, China has a unique opportunity to step into the world and be the dominant force in what we call high-energy physics or elementary particle physics.
I love physics. That's the only thing I can do. But of course, we have also to convince our bosses to invest money in this field. And that is more difficult. When I was director of CERN, I had to answer many times this question: why should we make a super accelerator? What is the reason? I could not say curiosity, that's it. So why should they put the money for it? The first is that young people are formed by this experience. And not all of them will become something or Shelley Glashow, etc. Many of them will do it for some time and then will go to the society. They will bring their know-how to the society. And this is the largest acquisition that society can make of very high level knowledge people. In fact, have to do a very difficult job. And in doing this job, they will have to invent things. And they can be very useful. There is one example that you all know, that when lab experiments were done, there was a big collaboration, and there must be a way to exchange data from one to another. And at the time, collaboration that had physicists in the United States, in Europe, etc., sent fax to exchange. Now, somebody working at CERN said we can do a network, and we can run along this network and find the data that you have in the United States and bring it here. That's called the World Wide Web. And for LHC, to exchange the data, we had to realize the first example of what now we call the cloud. Now, everybody now knows the cloud, but at that time, it was a completely strange concept, and it was applied the first time to the enormous amount of data by the LHC. So these various elements, I think, more than justify the investment of the governments, and will
earn a lot of Nobel Prizes.
And a lot of Nobel Prizes. It's a good investment.
There's one subject we've not been talking about, which is the essentially international, universal aspect of science. Science is not something that America does. It's not something that Europe does. It's not something that China does. It's something that we all do. After all, the most successful international organization in the world is CERN, which involves collaboration among over 100 different countries. So let me tell you of the first example I know of scientific collaboration between China and America. And it happened in 1960. It happened in Copenhagen, where Niels Bohr's son, Oa Bohr, took a bunch of us postdocs who were studying and researching in Copenhagen and brought them to a little island, Bornholm, to look for fossils. And we all got into a little crevasse and hunted. We were given hammers, and we broke the rocks, and we found trilobites. Everybody found a few trilobites to bring home. But I got tired of doing this, and so did my buddy, who was the first Chinese physicist to visit Copenhagen. So we went off, we climbed out of the crevasse and walked along this island until we found a cherry tree. And in the cherry tree, there were cherries, but only very high up, and I couldn't reach them. So I suggested that he get on my shoulders, and perhaps we can reach the cherries. But we still couldn't, so we came down and we looked all over and found a long branch of wood, and then he took the piece of wood and he got on my shoulders and he used the wood to pull down a branch, and we got cherries, so many cherries, we got almost sick eating cherries. And then we went back to our friends who were still in the crevasse, and we went home. Well, this was the first example of scientific collaboration between China and America.
我拿到诺贝尔奖的通知以后，在报上公布以后，有一个很有名的科学家叫 Richard Feynman， 他就写了封信给我，恭喜你拿诺贝尔奖，千万不要以为自己了不起。就是因为这句话，我从来不签名支持任何我不了解的事情。从1978年开始，就每年有10个到20个中国科学家到我这儿合作，现在已经快40年了，很多的科学家在我那儿工作过。 所以我对中国科学家能力是比较了解。从我的了解上，做对加速器是一定会成功。中国有很长的历史，中国人口占世界上1/5的人，过去几千年来对人类的知识、文化是非常有贡献。所以现在中国已经站起来了，应该继续对人类的知识做出重要的贡献。我觉得这是做前沿加速器的最重要的理由。
1994年，中国第一个3W 网站在高能所诞生，这里也是中国互联网的起点和开端。从那个时候开始，我们每个人都有了和世界互联的机会，这无疑是一个最生动的例子。它让我们清楚地看到，基础研究能够以自身独特的方式带动民生福祉的不断发展。科学不止步，人类对于星辰大海的追逐，就像一场没有尽头的壮丽征程，永无止境。我们衷心希望，在不久的将来，能够看到更多的基础研究结出累累硕果，绽放出绚烂的光彩。这里是对话，感谢各位收看。